Ephesians chapter 6, verses 5 through 9 read, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Obey them not only when their eye is upon you, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Serve wholeheartedly, as if you were serving the Lord, not people, because you know that the Lord will reward each and every one of you for whatever good you do, whether you be slave or free." We talk a lot on this show about how the Bible condones slavery and how it gives rules for slavery. Exodus explains what to pay for slaves and how hard you can beat them. And a lot of the times when we do this, theists call in to tell us that we're taking things out of context, that slave didn't mean the same thing that it meant then, that it does now, that really, slaves are more like servants and all these things, servants that you can buy and pass on as property and beat somehow. But these verses in particular really summarize what the Bible is talking about, I think. Obey your masters as you would obey Christ. Unquestioningly, immediately, unthinking, not trying to put your own worldly understanding upon the will of the person in charge of you. And in case you think that maybe that's a bit extreme, you can read the very next verse. This is Ephesians 6:9. "And masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Do not threaten them, since you know that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him." This verse kind of goes both ways in the circles of arguments, in that some people say, well, see, it's saying that the masters need to be nice. It says they need to be good. It says that God sees us all. But there's no such thing as a good slave owner. There is no such thing as a moral slave owner. And this verse is using the same word, master, to describe the owner of the slaves and God himself. So unless you think that you are in some sort of indentured servitude situation with God, then the biblical slavery that you're defending isn't nearly as cushy as you seem to believe that it is. It's all around disgusting. And anyone who defends it is also wholly disgusting. But hey, maybe you think that I'm taking something out of context or misinterpreting something some way, or maybe there's some sort of good slavery out there that I just haven't heard about. If you think that I'm getting anything wrong here, call in, because the show starts right now. Greetings and welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is April 14th in the year of our Lord 2024, and I am joined once again by the illustrious and handsome Jimothy Barrows. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. How you about yourself there, Forrest?
I am insanely tired and busy and stressed out, but I'm thrilled to be here, dude. I love it so much. Yeah. You and I were talking about before the show. I'm working quadruple time right now, but I always have time for this. This is just such a highlight of my month. We got a lot of great calls today. But before we get into it, I've got a couple of things I've got to tell everybody. The first one is that the Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. That's number one. Second thing is the question of the week, which is a thing that we're doing that I try my best to remember every time. And it's this week, our question of the week is, last week we asked you, missing from the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the blank. And we got 3 answers that our crew has pulled out that they want us to read. Answer number 3 is, blessed are those who put up the timestamps, for they will forestall my complaints. Definitely. Love the timestamp people. They're always cool.
Yeah.
Number 2, blessed are the sneezers. Love that.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
It's got that pun vibe to it. And then finally, number 1, blessed are the weak, for they will inherit the month. Wait for that 7-day calendar guy to call back in and tell us that this is proof of God.
Yeah, really. That's got to be I think that's the dumbest argument I've ever heard. The 7-day week proves God. Yeah, that's just crazy.
He's been hung up on every show I've ever seen him on. He was on this. He was on Talk Heathen. He was over on the Line. He was on all their shows. He's been hung up on. The last time I heard from him was on, I think it was on AXP. I was on with Jamie the Blind Limey, and we just let him talk. We let him do his whole thing, and like I disagreed with his premise. I said this premise didn't make any sense, and then Jamie said, "Okay, I'll grant your premise. Your conclusion doesn't make any sense." We've actually now heard your whole argument and it sucks. And the dude didn't know what to do when he couldn't keep to the script of just saying a bunch of offensive crap. And then when his argument doesn't go well, he drops a slur and he gets kicked off. Didn't know what to do. And he just kept going back to his weird, really weird shtick of like, I served you something delicious. It's like, I don't want to think about that. It sounds gross. It's very strange. That's up there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
We've got, like I said, we got a bunch of great calls already on the line, but as always, we prioritize theist callers. So if you are in the chat right now, if you're watching the show at this moment and we're live and you're a theist or a creationist or somebody who believes in the literal Jesus or in something about the Bible or wants to defend biblical slavery or biblical genocide or biblical whatever else that we strongly disagree with, the lines are open for you especially. The lines are filling up right now with all sorts of people, but like especially theist callers, we're always happy to talk to you because that's half the point of this show is to try to be convinced. We've been doing this for who knows how many seasons now, and we've yet to have one solid argument presented to us. This was 27?
Yeah.
My glob, dude. So with that, are you ready to jump right in, get started?
Absolutely.
Sweet. We've got Caleb, pronouns he, him, calling in from overarching hysteria. What? Or Ohio. He's calling from Ohio. What is the complexity of the universe argument for or against God? I've got some things to say about this. Caleb, you are on the Atheist Experience. How are you doing today?
Good.
All right. Sweet. So, right on. So, I've read the question that I have here on the call screen, but I'm wondering if there's more to what you're saying. Like, do you want to have expound on a little bit, or do you think that's good enough? Just is the complexity of the universe for or against God?
Well, it's more of a question to you guys. Like, what do you think?
Jim, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think just speaking as a software engineer, not a mechanical or double E, but complexity is not a sign of good design at the very least. Things need to be as simple as possible and as simpler. Complexity leads to catastrophic cascading failures, which are never very good. And the more complex a system, the worse that cascade failure can be. So simplicity is actually what we're looking at. And so when we look at biology, we don't see simplicity, we see complexity, which tends to mean that a system is growing organically. And I see this in my profession with some of the Fortune 500 companies that I work with who have very complex systems because those systems have grown up organically as the business needed them, and nobody has gone in and done an overhaul to go and say, what do we really need to do here, and try to make it simpler. And that's not an easy thing to do. You can make the case that this was tried at Twitter, now X. I don't care what Musk wants to call it, it's still Twitter. And see the failures that he's had there in trying to do that, because he just started ripping stuff out. He had no care about keeping systems alive and knowing what systems did. He just started firing people and doing it that way, and that's not a good way to do it either. But as a general rule, you only get complexity when things grow organically and without a design. And so if you're going to claim there's a designer, you need to show the design. And you really, I don't see a way to see that design in there, because everything is more complex than it needs to be.
Yeah, I would build off of that a little bit. Like, I want to hear what you have to say to what Jim said first. So, like, before I start rambling on, Caleb, what do you think about all that?
Well, I mean, I'm a theist. I'm a Christian specifically. So, I mean, I think it goes along with what you were saying. I know your name, but I don't remember the other guy's name who was just talking. But
I'm
anyway, doesn't that go against the second law of thermodynamics, which states that things go to disorder?
No,
not really.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't, because the second law of thermodynamics, if you apply it to the entire universe, we don't know if it actually applies to the entire universe, because we don't know if it's an isolated system or not. And so everybody who quotes the second law of thermodynamics always forgets the last part, which is the most important part, and that is in an isolated system. And even then, it doesn't apply to necessarily to the entire, or it applies to the entire system as a whole, but not necessarily to pieces within it. So you can have, because it's not homogeneous, it's trying to get to that homogeneity. But there are places where you can have very high energy and other places that have lower energy within the system, with all of it moving towards that direction. So there's just no way that any of it violates the second law of thermodynamics. Especially if you understand the second law.
Yeah, I would also just point out there, like, things like the second law, it talks about an increase in entropy, an increase of like the probability of disorder and things like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that things will always become chaotic. It just means that, like, say, for example, the one of the better demonstrations I've seen of it is a sandcastle. There are, a million different ways in which those individual grains of sand could be arranged to form a sand castle. But there's a lot more ways that those individual grains of sand could be arranged to make a pile of sand. And so, like, to say the pile of sand is a higher entropy thing, that like the castle is going to tend towards the pile. Yeah, that makes sense. But when we look at things like galaxies, planets, life, these are things that actually follow really, really basic fundamental laws of physics and chemistry. And so, like, as amazing as a planet or a galaxy is, that's just how gravity works. And it's going to do something like that. It's like, if you know all the parts of it, it kind of stands to reason that that's how they end up. Life seems spectacular and extraordinary, but at its fundamental level, every single bit of life is just following basic chemical laws. And so, like, there's nothing like, a sandcastle where, like, actually this is having to be continuously propped up on itself. And it could just be a pile. Yeah, all the atoms in your body could just be a pile as well. But it just so happens the way that they're behaving is also quite natural. And so, like, without life continuing to live, you're going to tend towards the pile. But it just so happens you have this really cool, like, self-driving replicating system. So yeah, it's that it doesn't really go against the second law at all. But also, to build off of a little bit of what Jim said earlier that I think is important, is that the in your question, something that you said in there, and this may be redundant, but like what you said in your question is complexity evidence for or against God? I wouldn't argue that it's evidence against God so much. I appreciate what Jim is saying, and I think he's right. But what I would say is that, like, when you're talking about atheism, it's really important to be stressing evidence for, because you can't prove a negative. So saying, like, this proves there is no God, or this is evidence against the idea of a God, I could track with that in the way that Jim was saying it, that, like, if we're actually talking about, like, good design, that doesn't really work. But in terms of just, like, any kind of super intelligent thing making the universe and blah, 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 I just rhetorically try to steer away from that a little bit. But that's just me. And I'm a different person than Jim is. And I liked what Jim said anyway. So I'm just throwing that out there. It's just a thing to think about as well. Just in terms of, like, the actual phrasing of your question.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you mentioned a sandcastle, but then I think that could be also an example, or like a analogy to use for intelligent design. Like, you were talking about pile of sand or sandcastle, and I might be taking what you said out of context a little bit, but change that a little bit. Like, the odds of grains of sand making or forming a sandcastle is much lower than just finding a pile of sand. Just like the people we are.
Yeah, it depends. Right, but so. Right, but we have perfectly natural formations that people claim are built by mankind. There are the steps off of the coast of Japan, the giant steps that people claim were created by somebody. And then there's a wall in Russia that people claim are stones. And when you go and talk to a geologist, they go, no, it's this type of stone, and that's the way these stones weather and form over time. It's just the way they work. And so we see design all the time where there is no design. And when I was going back to design, in order to determine something is designed, you always have to compare it to something you either know is designed or know isn't designed. So if I take a watch and I want to look at a watch and I go, was this watch designed? And I go, oh, look, the metallurgy is not something we normally see in nature. We can assume that it was designed. If we look at a watch and we go, oh, look, there are cogs, and nature doesn't use cogs, therefore it must be designed. And then we go, oh, wait, no, that's not quite true, because the leaf cutter actually uses cogs for its primary means of leaping. So it's not true that cogs aren't there. And it may not be true that you can get brass or other alloys naturally as well under the right circumstances. But that's, I mean, that goes back to being able to compare it to something to the natural world and going, we don't see this, therefore it must be designed. But we can't do that at a universal level. We have no universe to compare to. There's just no way to do it. We'd have to have another universe to compare to in order to make those types of things. We don't know what a designed or undesigned universe looks like. We only have this one to explore.
I think it's also important to point out, like, to kind of build off of what Jim was saying there about the watch and everything like that. Like, I think that what you're, and correct me if I'm wrong here if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, Jim, but like, it sounded like you were kind of pointing it. It's not just the things that make the thing; it's the things that make the things that make the thing that don't have like a natural, right. And like that. You know, I'm a biologist. I can talk a little bit about planets and galaxies, but like mainly, you know, one of the big things that theists ask about is like, well, where did life come from, and all these different things. And that, to build off what Jim was saying, the things that make the life we find naturally, and the things that make life we find naturally as well. So like every part of the universe, from the things that make from quarks all the way up to life. So quarks to protons to atoms to molecules to macromolecules to organelles to cells to tissues to organs to organ systems to organisms, all the way up we find naturally out in the universe, and things that are occurring all on their own without any magic guiding them. So it's not like you see complexity and you're like, okay, well, this is really complicated, therefore there must be somebody behind it. You look a little deeper than that and you say, okay, this is really complicated. What's it made of? What's it doing? How is it doing what it's doing? And no matter where we look when doing that, we never find anything supernatural. We never find anything that isn't self-directed. We never find anything that requires magic to operate. It's all just stuff that the universe does. And that's really freaking cool. And I think it's cooler than saying, there's some guy that did it. You know what I mean? There's just some guy that put this together and made it this way. It's way more interesting and way more exciting to me to be like, yeah, no, this is just the natural way that the universe works. That life is kind of just a thing that can happen. And it's apparently very rare, but it's really, really, really interesting and really beautiful that way. I don't know. Maybe that doesn't resonate with you. What do you think, Caleb?
So when you said like you used the word magic, and you mentioned like the way things work, and you went all the way down to quarks, and then you went all the way back up to life. Like, nobody is denying that. Christians don't deny that. We just think that stuff is too complex to have evolved or come about by a natural process.
Why?
So when you say it's too why is it too complex? Go with that.
Well, because in the atheistic worldview, there was nothing, and that would require
wrong.
To come up.
Absolutely wrong.
Why?
Every time, I'm sorry, I am intentionally cutting you off on this one, because no atheist says there was nothing that I'm aware of. In fact, science doesn't say that anything started with nothing. The beginning of the universe, the most popular one is it started with a singularity, which is not nothing. I'm unaware of any hypothesis for the beginning of the universe that starts with nothing. Not only that, just to put the final nail in the coffin, science has proved that nothing cannot exist. They have done several experiments that prove that nothing cannot exist within our universe. So I just want to stop you there. No atheist that I'm aware of says that, and I probably know more than you do. So my anecdotal evidence for that is stronger than yours, and I'm unaware of any survey that would go to prove that. But I hear that, and it really just kind of pisses me off, because you're straw manning what the atheist positioned. and you're strawmanning it for every atheist. That is just not true. I don't think I hate to speak to Forrest on anything, but I can safely say, speaking for Forrest, that he also doesn't believe the universe didn't come from nothing.
You can say that. Yeah.
Am I too far off base?
No, I think you can say that for me, because like that's the thing is like you can say, like, if we go all the way back to the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, there was a singularity. It expanded. That's why I hate the word Big Bang, because it sounds like there was this explosion in nothing and then the universe happened, and like that's not accurate. It's an everywhere stretch. Everything started stretching, and that's where we got this. But before that, before the Big Bang, where theists use words like nothing, I don't know what that is, and nor does anybody else ever. We don't know what's before the Big Bang, because the question of before the Big Bang doesn't make any sense. The Big Bang is where time started, and it's also where, like, when space began expanding. So you're asking what happened before the concept of before meant anything in a place that was outside of everywhere, like a place that was not anywhere that exists ever. In that place that isn't a place at a time that wasn't time, what happened? And I don't know. We don't know what that means. And so when you talk about an atheistic worldview, we can get into the pedantics of like, whatever, that's the thing. But like, we're not saying that everything came from nothing. We're saying we have evidence to show that the universe started 13.8 billion years ago, and we can see how that worked pretty well. We know that that's what happened, but we don't know much more than that. We're still learning about it, and we're comfortable with just saying, I don't know about certain things, instead of, again, just saying, well, there was magic, and then now there's all these things. That's a bit too much of a stretch.
So Caleb, can you start your comment again without strawmanning and being scientifically incorrect and saying that anybody says it starts with nothing? Can you rephrase without that particular incorrectness?
I didn't. You said that science has disproved nothing within the universe. Of course, I wasn't saying that there was nothing. I was saying simply no life, nothing that is actually conscious or alive at all.
Okay, yeah, there was a time before life.
Yeah.
And so what?
Life, yeah.
It would require abiogenesis of some sort to start off this whole evolutionary process that you guys talk about. And
absolutely, abiogenesis.
There was a time before stars, and then stars happened, and there was a time before planets, and then the first planet formed. There was a time before life, and then the first life got started.
There's a time before matter.
Yeah, there was exactly. Yeah, and that was the time we don't know that exists. And so like there was a time before everything, supposedly. But like in terms of like everything physical in the universe, yeah, you could point to just about anything and say there was a time before the telephone. So how did people talk? But that's just what happens is that things develop in really cool ways. Are you asking me like, I'm trying to understand what you're saying, and I understand we've cut you off a bit, so forgive me. I'll let you speak now. But like, are you saying that like the fact that life got started is too big of a stretch for you, or are you saying that like that life had to be forever? Like, what are you saying?
I'm just saying that for evolution to start without a creator, that is, then life would have to come from nothing, because you believe that there was a point when there was nothing that was living, right?
No, we don't. You keep using this word nothing, and I would like you to stop.
He did clarify. He said he means life came from non-life. And so it's
he just used nothing. He just used that word again to refer to absolute nothing, which we already know doesn't exist. So, yes. There was a time when life didn't begin. That process is called abiogenesis. It's still under study. I wouldn't say there's a theory there, but there's a ton of good evidence that there's more than one way for it to happen.
Yeah, Caleb, if you'd like, I'm happy to talk about abiogenesis with you and why it's very, very reasonable. Or do you have a different point you're trying to get to? Oh, excuse me, real burpish.
All right, well, what is the evidence for it?
So there's a few things you can think about. Number one, Jim, do you mind if I go on a little tangent?
Absolutely not. I was just getting ready to go catch it, Forrest.
So just there's a few things to think about here. Number one, we mentioned the stuff that makes the stuff that makes stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to I'll try to keep the jargon to a minimum as best I can. If I say anything that sounds weird, feel free to stop me and I'll be happy to clarify. There's 4 major macromolecules that make life, and those are proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids. Those are the things that make everything alive, right? Proteins are made of things called amino acids. So that's the stuff that makes the stuff that makes life. Amino acids self-assemble. We've seen this in laboratory settings, and we've also seen this. We just find them in space all the time. Like you go to some asteroid, some comet, we take samples, we find amino acids. And so there's like 500 different kinds of amino acids that we've discovered. You only need 20-ish, around 20, really 20, but like 22-ish. But you only need 20 of them to make life. Like all life on Earth uses about 20 of them. So we can not only make these things in a laboratory, but we also find them in nature all the time. Carbohydrates are made of sugars. We find those in nature all the time as well, and in space we find it. In fact, we found all of these things. What was it? Lipids are made of fatty acids. Guess what we find in space? Lipids are made of a few things. That's the main one. And nucleic acids are made of nitrogenous bases: adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil. Those are the things that make DNA and RNA. And guess what? We have found all 5 of those in space too. We find them in meteorites quite frequently. So all of the things that make life, we have found in space, and or we have been able to. Some of them we've been able to make in laboratories here on Earth. So those are the building blocks of life. But where do they get to the part? Because these are all polymers, right? They can't just be by themselves. Well, it just so happens that I think it was 2 years ago, there was a paper that came out showing that it's peptide elongation, which is the turning amino acids into very simple little mini itty bitty proteins. We call peptides. And those are developing by themselves on the surface tension of microdroplets of water. And so the leading hypothesis for abiogenesis right now is that life probably started in tide pools. Before that, we were talking about hydrothermal vents, but now a lot more evidence is showing tide pools. And just in time for that, we find that in the kind of ocean spray that you get out of tide pools, that's where amino acids form proteins by themselves. Nucleic acids forming RNA, that was another big one. And I believe it was I think it was early this year. There was a paper that came out showing oligonucleotide acids, so very short chunks of RNA, self-assembling in the presence of like really basic minerals and shit that we find all over the planet. And we also know that RNA can self-replicate. We've seen that happening in laboratory settings and in the field quite a bit. RNA can produce its own enzyme, can produce enzymes that can help it to self-replicate. RNA works as genetic material and also as a catalyst for lots of other biochemical reactions. You can think about, for example, the central dogma of biology: DNA, RNA to protein, transcription and translation. What does DNA turn into? It's turned into mRNA, messenger RNA, that codes for a protein. What reads the messenger RNA to build a protein? It's rRNA. It's a ribosome, which is made of ribosomal RNA. Ribosomes are made of RNA. What brings the amino acids over to build the protein? It's transfer RNA, tRNA. So RNA reads RNA and tells RNA to build a protein. Like it's crazy how many things this molecule does. Don't even start on RNA. I'll be here all day. Long story short, the things that make life, we've found all of them in naturally occurring all over the place. We have seen ways in which they chain together and build themselves all over the place. We still have some hangups in the middle there. We're not sure how all the nuclei or how the amino acids all become left-handed, which that's a whole thing that I can explain, but it'll take like 20 minutes. But we don't have an abiotic way to do that in the lab, but we see it happen in nature. So clearly there's a way. And also think about the fact that life, we have like evidence of life on this planet, like almost immediately after the Hadean period ended. So like we have about 1 billion years after the Earth's first form, where the Earth is a molten hellscape, just comets and asteroids all the time, no life happening. Like the second that stops, we get evidence of life. Evidence of life goes back like 3.5 billion years. And so, like, almost as quickly as it was possible for life to start, it started. And that is wild as hell to think about. I could go on this tangent for a long time, and there's honestly, there's a lot more to it. I would encourage everybody listening to check out NASA's astrobiology primer. You can look it up for free online. They're on, I think, version 2. I actually know a friend who's she's an astrobiologist. Who's working. She's an undergraduate fellow, and she's working with them on writing another one pretty soon. But that'll tell you all sorts of stuff about how stars form, how planets form, where life comes from, everything that we know about it. The NASA Astrobiology Primer is a great read. It's pretty short. It's only a couple hundred pages long. So I would encourage everybody to look that up. I would encourage Kaler to look that up too, but he already hung up a long time ago. As soon as I said amino acids, he hung up. I don't think he wanted an answer. Just what I would encourage, like any theist listening that thinks that life starting is too fantastic, is just to remember that the stuff that makes life self-assembles all the time. And then the stuff that those things make self-assemble, and we've seen it happening. And if you get some RNA, which we know can self-replicate, to bump into some lipids are fats, and go pour some oil into water, it naturally forms little bubbles exactly like the cell membranes that wrap up every single one of your cells. It naturally forms that shape. If you have phospholipids like your cell membranes are, they naturally form bilayers, which is what your cell membranes are, as a phospholipid bilayer. If you get these naturally assembling molecules that are behaving in a natural way to bump into each other, you have something very much like a first cell. And it's stuff, all of it is stuff you can do in a jar. So it's really not that far-fetched. We haven't seen every single step of the way of it. And if you were to boil the whole thing down to like 10 rhetorical steps, we have steps 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, and 9. And there's a lot of theists out there that like to say, well, you don't have step 4, so you don't know anything. And that's simply not how science works. And that's simply not how thinking works. So look up abiogenesis and look up the National Astrobiology Primer and learn some cool shit about some cool shit, because I'm telling you, it is worth your time to do so.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me do that. I appreciate it.
I learned something every time you're on the channel. It is. It's big and it's complex. And if you think it's simple, then you don't. I hate it when people say it's just simple biology. It means they know nothing about biology. And I know far less than you do. You have forgotten more than I know, I'm sure. But even I know that there's no such thing as simple biology. It's way too
nothing
complex.
In biology is simple biology. That's what I love to say. You know what I mean? And like, that's the thing. I wasn't kidding when I was talking about, if you get me talking about RNAs, we'll be here all day. Because, dude, RNA does so much stuff. Like I'm doing a second master's right now because I'm really stupid, and like I'm doing a class right now on molecular epigenetics, and we did a whole system on how like non-coding RNAs, because you have a lot of them. You have RNA is genetic material and a catalyst. It does a lot of stuff. So you have stretches of RNA that don't actually code for anything. But that doesn't mean they're useless. And you've got long non-coding RNAs and small non-coding RNAs. And you've got these things called microRNAs. You want to hear about some shit, dude? MicroRNAs can do this thing. MicroRNAs are very, very short little RNA sequences, oligoribonucleotides, you can call them. And they can do post-transcriptional gene control. And what that means is you've got, you make your DNA makes messenger RNA goes to ribosome, transfer RNA brings over amino acids, you build a protein, right? That's the whole thing. No, because what can happen is you make the messenger RNA, and so it's transcribed, but before it gets translated to a protein, microRNAs can come attached to it and degrade it and destroy it, and you can shut it off. So the gene is still being expressed, but you still don't get the result of the gene being, you still don't get the protein out of it. And so you can have like this gene over here that's coding for these microRNAs that's controlling whether or not this gene over here is effective, which is dope as hell. Because normally when you talk about epigenetics, you're talking about whether or not the DNA is being read at all. Because you turn euchromatin into heterochromatin, you wind it up really tight around a histone to form a chromosome, and it's wound too tightly to be read. And so you have this gene that's effectively turned off. And that's really important. That's why even though you have the same DNA in every cell cell of your body. That's why your bone cells aren't developing into eyes, because they're the same DNA, but different genes are turned on. And now we're talking about like, yeah, the gene can be turned on, but who cares? Because it's still not going to do anything. And that is so exciting to me. And I want to talk about it a lot, but I can't. We don't have time.
Well, I'd just like to say that, when you talk about epigenetics, my understanding is that we didn't start getting into or understanding epigenetics until just after World War II, when they started studying women who were pregnant in Poland at a time when there was no food. And they started studying those children and the children of those children. And what they found was those children of these women who lived through the German occupation of Poland, especially in that third trimester, had babies who tended to be put on more weight because the women were starving at that point. And so at that point, the body started to code to store every bit of energy they could find, which when food became non-scarce again and became plentiful, turned the children fat. And it tended to, it's not 100%, but tended to make that generation heavier. However, the third generation, that next generation, the children of the children, also tended to be slightly heavier. So we saw this epigenetic event happen in the 40s and continue on for at least 2 more generations, just to kind of put some context on the science you're giving us. But that's the way that all impacts, a single event impacts generations epigenetically.
It's neo-Lamarckian evolution. It's really cool. And what's so that's so exciting, because like what you're doing there is like if you are pregnant with a female child, the egg cells, you don't grow more eggs over the course of your life. You're born with as many as you're going to have. And so you are carrying your grandchildren in you as well. And that's why it carried for 2 generations, because you're affecting the DNA in both of these generations. Same thing happens if you smoke while pregnant too. You have an increased rate of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, all sorts of things. It's in not just the next generation, but you are hurting your grandchildren. It's crazy. Right. It's so cool, dude. And like, that's the whole thing. That's what epigenetics is all about. It's like, it's not changing the DNA. It's changing how the DNA is expressed and like what genes actually get to participate in your life. And so you can have 2 people that are genetically identical with drastically different phenotypes because they have epigenetic differences. And it's just beyond cool, dude. I'm so stoked about it.
Yeah. And we had better get back to the show before.
Yeah, we had a show to do. Hey.
I hate to bring all this fun stuff to an end.
Speaking of the show that it's our job to be doing also, I forgot to read the question of the week, so like we'll do that too. It's the prompt for this week that you should just clip this and put it at the beginning. What is a good response to the rapture is coming? That's the question for this week. Everybody, type your answers in the comment section and tell us, and then pretend like I said this at the right time, please.
I would have to say that would we have to first recreate the Raptors in order for them to come?
Right, I was going to say, if the rapture's coming, well, you better get a towel. Really quickly, I also want to say we have a thing that I also have been asked to read, and I'm going to read it now. Is that, first of all, if you like what we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Giving to our Patreon ensures that we can continue to produce great quality content like this. Watch Jim and I struggle to stay on topic again by supporting our Patreon.
Because one of us will intentionally set the other one off.
Yep.
Usually me setting Forrest off.
It's how it usually works. You should see us in person. It's a wild time. Also, please support us using the fundraiser, which is down directly below the chat at this moment. The ACA keeps 100% of the proceeds that you donate there. Google, YouTube, they don't take a cut. So we will be using the funds that you use on the fundraiser there to send some of your favorite hosts to the Bat Cruise, which is happening on August 24th. And so they've got J. Mike, Secular Rarity, and some guy named Forrest who are supposed to be there. So donate to that fundraiser to help us afford plane tickets to get those people to the Bat Cruise. That'll be really cool. And tickets to that Bat Cruise will be available very soon. You can also get your AXP swag. Go to tiny.cc/merch-ACA to get mugs, t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and all sorts of other things. Look at those. Aren't those great? And finally, we want to take a second to give a big shout out to the crew who makes this whole show possible. The crew are the best part of the show. Look at them over there. Look at her not paying attention while I'm shouting her out. How dare she? We've got all sorts of great crew over here.
She was answering a call, I'm sure.
How dare she when I wanted to say some things, not be perfectly ready for me to put her on camera. But yeah, come to the Bat Cruise, come see us, donate to the fundraiser, buy some merch, and shout out the crew. They're all good peoples. And with that, we can now finally move on to doing the rest of the show. Man, this is my actual job, y'all. I'm supposed to be good. I've been doing this for a minute. I'm supposed to be good at this by now. As always,
that's why we keep having you back.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just can't remember to do the announcements or like promote the things. We've got a bunch. And I think this one's really good following the last call. We've got Bruno calling in from Uruguay, pronouns he, him, wants to talk about when people talk about a belief in science. Bruno, you are on AXP. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Thank you for asking, Forrest. I just wanted to do a quick call and talk to you guys about this because I've been binging the show a bunch and you kind of get close to talking about it, but I haven't found this particular topic yet, at least in the backlog. And it's come up in different discussions I've had with people. And so I wanted to know what you guys thought of maybe not saying so much, oh, I believe evolution is real, or I believe in the Big Bang, or something like, oh, I trust this is real, or I have confidence that this is real, because, you know, I think it's more appropriate language given that like trust and confidence like can be revoked. And that's kind of how science works, you know, like if something new comes up, you kind of like, okay, what was before is gone now or is changed. And now you trust in this new thing. I don't know. I just want to kind of get your thoughts on that.
So what are you attempting to do by removing the word belief from being used in science? Because it seems like a perfectly good word to me.
Well, from what I've seen, at least, is that like a bunch of like religious people just kind of take belief as like, oh, this is like something I feel in my heart, and this is like it has to be true because I feel it's true, and I believe that doesn't matter what the evidence shows. I believe this is true, and that's like, oh, you believe in science, you have like this unwavering belief in science that means that you will always trust in what the scientists say and that kind of thing. And so I feel like it's like a word that can get a little bit hazy.
It is. I mean, words are fun, and they can mean whatever we want them to mean, ultimately. But some people, you know, that's also why we try and draw a distinction between belief and faith. Belief at its simplest is just an acceptance of a claim as true. Whether you have sufficient evidence to warrant belief is a completely different question. But when most people do that, they're really referring to faith. And unfortunately, if you look at both definitions, you'll find that they are incredibly close together in modern parlance, that they are synonyms. So yeah, language is messy, but I don't know that it would be less messy by trying to introduce a new word because theists would just adopt that word as well. I think that's why it's important to clarify, you know, is your method of determining something true a valid way to determine something is true? Is there anything that I can't believe in my heart to be true? For instance, my usual rebuttal to that is it possible for me to believe in my heart that you're nothing more than 3 gerbils in a human suit? And, you know, that's usually my rebuttal.
Yeah, I think it's really important to like point out, like, because I am one of those people that gets a little bit nitpicky, because I understand where you're coming from, Bruno, is that like, I get that all the time. Like, you just believe what your professors told you. You just believe what somebody wrote in an old book someday. You just believe, you have this faith in science. And like Jim was saying, these are really synonymous terms in our language. And so people tend to lump them together, especially for shitty reasons. So for me, I try to draw a distinction and say, I don't believe in science. I have evidence for science, or I have this logical expectation of science. Like, I don't believe that the sun is going to rise tomorrow. I have a logical, reasonable expectation that the sun is going to rise, not because it's happened every day so far, but because I understand the rotation of the planet and because I understand our position in the solar. Like, and when I do that, though, it really, really, really gets pedantic very fast, and it gets into this really just sticky semantic way. I like to say that, like, belief is accepting a claim, knowledge is when you have so much reason to believe a claim that it would be absurd for you not to believe in it. So, like, I know that this is a can of Coca-Cola. How do you know anything? What I mean by know is that it would be ridiculous for me to say that it's anything else besides that. So going ad absurdum, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to say that I know this, like that. You can really get into the things, the weeds with it. But at the end of the day, I promise theists will come up with another terrible argument. I find that they kind of go in a cycle, and that is one that comes up all the time. You just believe science, and then I'm like, no, I know it. Well, how do you know anything? What does it even mean to know anything? And like, you can't know anything is real unless you have some sort of almighty authority that gives you the knowledge. You're like, you can't know anything is certain unless you have one thing that is absolute to compare all certainty to, and that is God. And so without God, you can't know anything, or like all of these ridiculous things. And that's why, like, most people who do shows like this or do debates like this are prepared to give a really, really obnoxious, pedantic, just ass-painting fucking answer about, like, what does knowledge actually mean and what does belief actually mean. But at the end of the day, I just don't get your hopes up is what I'm saying. If you want my answer for a different word besides belief, I usually use evidence. I usually define belief in those ways. But I promise you, it is not going to change anything in the long run in terms of, like, theists being dishonest about words. It's just not going to help.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that it's kind of an uphill fight, and I just I feel like belief and like that word particularly is very charged with, like, religious overtones lately. And I see, like, theist scholars use it all the time, and it really frustrates me because it doesn't mean what you think it means, kind of thing, you know? So,
yeah,
it's the same thing as when people say it's just a theory.
Yeah.
It's the same
just a theory.
Yes. Okay. So you don't know what a theory is then. Great. Like, that's thank you for telling me. It's the same thing when somebody calls in and says, like, oh, you just believe in science. Okay. So you clearly don't agree with what the word belief means, because either you're using it in this weird way intentionally to be an asshole, or you genuinely don't understand this word because you would never use that word that way any other time that you use that word. You would never use it that way. And so, like, it's deeply frustrating. It's just another dishonest theist argument where if I spin this in this weird way, then I can make a problem for an atheist. But if I think I will deliberately not think about it that way for me, because then it'll be a problem. But if I think about it this way for somebody else, then it is a problem for that other person. And it doesn't matter if I win. It only matters if they lose. That's all that it is. That kind of thing. It just, God, it sucks, dude. I just said, God, it sucks.
Yeah,
I just remind, in that vein, I did an interview once. I think it was on Seth Andrews' channel once. I did a thing with him. And there was a theist in the comments whose only argument was to point out every single time I said things like, God knows what this was, or like, oh my God, I don't know. Or like, anytime I said the word God, they would point it out and say, see, you really do believe. You really, that's why you're saying that. And I had a boss once who did the same thing. I said something along the lines of, oh my God. He's like, why do you say that if you don't believe? Why would you say? Because clearly, secretly, I'm like, dude, if I said holy cow, would you think I'm a Hindu? Fuck off. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, there's always going to be some sort of, like, bullshit rhetorical or a semantic argument. So I think what you're calling about today and what you're talking about, it's really good to know how to do that and to see the comment section ahead of time, but do not be surprised when the next bullshit argument rolls around, because it will.
Yeah.
I definitely think that, like, the the saying, "Oh my God, you said oh my God" thing is like the lowest tier of apologetics ever. Like it's really just an appeal to this, like the
that and pointing
way
out that we
language
use
works.
BC and AD.
Actually, it's a pretty weak one, I think.
Using AC and
Hebrew.
AC and AD for. Yeah, there's a lot of those 7-day week guy. Using common phraseology.
Oh, yeah, that one was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The worst.
Yes.
That one was really frustrating to hear.
Yeah. The English bulldozed their way across the planet and brought their religion with them and killed everybody who didn't convert. Therefore, Jesus. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's almost true. It'd be true. Probably closer to true if it was Spanish.
Yeah, exactly. Man.
No offense to Spanish speakers out there, but if you're in South America and you speak Spanish, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bruno, you're awesome. Thanks so much for calling in.
I do speak Spanish, and it gets pretty tough.
Yeah, Spanish is such a beautiful and eloquent language with so many problems, and I say that as an English speaker with way more problems. so like
I will say that as someone who has tried to localize languages for software. Spanish is actually the hardest to do. It's harder than English because things like senora and doña will change meanings depending on where you are. They can be an honorific or the equivalent of a derogatory, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's more. There are more people in the world who speak Spanish than English. There's so many Spanish-speaking countries, and like it's that way all the time. Like this thing that means this thing in Venezuela is going to mean something completely different in Chile. That's going to mean completely different in Cuba. The guy. I'll ask you, Bruno. What does the word chévere mean to you?
Well, I know what it means because I have coworkers that are from different countries here in Latin America, but it basically means cool, I think, from what I've heard at least.
Yeah. So that's the way I learned it too. You know? I learned Spanish from a guy who from Cuba, and chévere was his way to say cool, and he said it to me, and I've said it so long now that it's just second nature. And I said that to some dude, I forgot where he is from. I think he was from like Guatemala or something. He's like, why would you say that? It's like you just said like neato or like groovy. It's just such a really outdated, like why? What is that? Yeah. Like that's a thing. That's like hanging with your grandpa is a chévere thing to do. It doesn't mean anything like that. And the same thing, I learned the word disculpe to mean like excuse me. And my Spanish professor in college is like, did you kill someone? Why did you say it that way? Like that's really intense.
It's very formal disculpe here in Uruguay also. Yeah. I would say that Spanish is beautiful in the same way like a birth is beautiful. Like it's really amazing. But damn, it's very complicated and it can get painful sometimes. Yeah.
I love that. Oh man. Anyway, but thank you so much, Bruno. I will sit here and talk about languages all day as well. We did have a show. We have a show talking about RNA and language. It'll be great.
You should do that. I see episodes coming up in the future there.
Yeah, dude. Anyway, Bruno, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for calling in, dude.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
Take care. Also, we had somebody in the chat I just saw here, Guatemalan here. Chévere does sound like something an old person would say. Thank you. Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I
say that localization bit as a white guy in the United States who doesn't speak a word of Spanish and therefore doesn't pick up on all of this, right? Is someone who's just completely ignorant and it's just like, wait a minute, what? Huh? It means because I've had high school Spanish.
Yep. And then you're gonna walk around with your high school Spanish throwing around vosotros forms, and everybody in Mexico is like, "What the fuck? What are you talking about?" Yeah. That's the whole thing, man. It is such a super diverse language, and I'm just trying to get good at like Latin American Spanish because that's what's around me the most in Oklahoma. Right. Like if I can get good at that, I'll be all right. But even then, my pronunciation's weird, and I still have to hear it, translate it. What do I want to say? Translate that, and say it takes me 5 minutes to say anything. Oh man.
Well,
So with that,
after
we've
that
got
fun call.
yeah, that's having happy time talking about the humanities, and now we've got Amir calling in from California, pronouns he him, who says that he can prove that God exists using the cosmological argument. Watch as we suddenly become significantly grumpier with the click of a button. We've got Amir, pronouns he him, calling from California. Amir, you are on AXP. How you doing, dude?
Yeah, what's up, man? How's it going?
It's going really well, man. It's going really well. We've got about 30 minutes left in the show, and I want to hear what you have to say. So, I'll give the floor to you. How can you prove God exists with the cosmological argument? Please define the cosmological argument and explain what you're talking about before you actually make the argument. So we'll make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, so my understanding of the cosmological argument is that it's going to have to do with like objects and sort of causes and events and stuff like that, just very broadly, right? And the sort of species of cosmological argument that I'm sort of like interested in offering is going to be a modal version of the cosmological argument that sort of differs from the traditional one, right? That's been sort of explicated by Brian Leftow in the literature, right?
So I just Googled it just to be safe, because I'm talking about the same thing as you.
And I've got it in front of me.
Cool. So the googly that I came up with here is just the cosmological argument is the suggestion that it can be assumed that God exists because people can perceive the existence of the universe. The fact that the universe exists is in itself evidence that a God designed it. Not necessarily the argument from complexity, just there is stuff, therefore somebody made the stuff, and that somebody is God. Is that what you're presenting to us?
No, Google actually sort of like delivered you inaccurate information. So the technical usage of the term cosmological argument is most often used to sort of like refer to contingency arguments. And most commonly, right, there's like William Lane Craig's arguments, right, which is saying that, you know, everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Amir, just 1 second there, Amir.
The universe has a cause.
Amir, hold on just 1 second. I don't think that Google was wrong. Jim and I both came up with stuff from different sources, but it doesn't really matter. What I'm really interested in is what are you saying then? So if it's not the cosmological argument that both Jim and I have just checked, what is your actual arguments then?
Yeah, I mean, so now that the sort of like technical error was laid bare there, right? I'm sort of interested in delivering my argument. So we can sort of go premise by premise, right? So premise one of the argument is just that the fact that there exists just changeable things that do exist, right? That's all premise one is saying. And it's saying that
right, to exist has a cause, yes.
Yeah, and then premise two is going to say that C is going to be possibly de-explained, right?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Explanation. Yeah, so there's a technical term that's employed in the literature called a de-explanation, right? So just a D-explanation. And that's what premise two is sort of like referencing, right?
Well, what is premise two? I didn't hear it.
Oh, yeah, so premise two, you know, if there's some sort of lack of tracking there, right? It was just saying that C is possibly de-explained, right? Where C is going to be the fact that there are changeable things that do exist.
Okay, so things that exist, we agree.
All right, so premise two is that the third premise will be explained. That's whatever. Okay, fine. And then the third thing was what?
No, that's not premise two. Wait, I didn't even say the third premise. Are you like sort of schizophrenic or something?
No, we're repeating what you're saying.
I just repeated what you said. Maybe I misheard you, but like
sort of hallucinating by coincidence. Okay.
Say what you said again, because I clearly misunderstood it.
Yeah, of course. So premise two is just saying that C is possibly de-explained, right?
C explains? That's the word we're having a problem with.
That
C possibly explains?
Yeah, I know you guys have sort of a problem with, so it's not C is explained. Look, we're just going to go very slowly here, right? So just like write this down.
You've been going slowly.
Type in the word C.
C, okay, so S-E-A, S-E-E?
Or the letter C.
Or letter C.
The letter,
yeah.
The letter C. Yeah, it's a variable. Yeah, propositional variable. Yeah, and then put a space. Okay. And then presumably you know how to type is, so just write is down.
Okay.
Okay, no, we got what you mean by C. That's the problem we have. So letter C, some variable you're calling C, is explained where?
Yeah, C is just what premise one is saying. Yeah, C is what premise one is saying. There's a fact that changeable things do exist.
Yes, things exist. We agree. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay.
That's
Go
not
on.
what the premise is saying. You're like lost in the sauce right now, right?
That's what you just said. Is that things
I'm
exist,
repeating
right?
what you
Changeable
just said,
things do
yes.
exist.
That's not
C
what I
is
said.
that things exist.
No, C, wait, now you're just not tracking. So C is going to be the fact that there's changeable things that do exist. So it's about changeable things, right?
Okay.
Presumably, if you're like,
Okay, so we don't need
right?
C. We can we don't need C. We can just say that things exist.
Right.
We don't
you
need
got it.
need to put a variable to it at all. Let's not complicate things.
Language.
Go on. What's
what?
next?
You can sort of try expressing it in an adequate language, right?
Well, you're the one who's talking to us. You're the one who should have been prepared to talk to us. And if we're not understanding what we're saying, it's your fault, not ours. So continue, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go very, very slowly here, right? So premise, we're going
We haven't moved at all in 5 minutes.
track error here. I agree. Yeah, you have sort of like a mental issue. So premise one is going to be the
Amir,
fact that there
One more insult and I'm hanging up on your ass, dumbass. Hey, listen,
Dude,
listen, dumbass.
Amir.
I'm tired of you insulting us. You called us. You should be prepared to explain to us what you're talking about. That you can't do that is not our fault. That's your fault as the communicator, not our fault as the communicatees. Okay? So you need to correctly make sure that you are understood. It's not our responsibility to do that. You have to be understood. One more insult, we're hanging up on you. We're not stupid. We're both probably smarter than you are. You're just incapable of explaining yourself adequately. So let's start again. Premise one is what?
Yeah, so it's the fact that there exists just the changeable things that do exist, right? That obtains.
Yes.
Okay.
Premise one,
And then
things
what?
exist.
No, that's just another tracking error. You're sort of repeating the tracking error that I
tell you
have
what.
corrected on a compendium of
what.
occasions.
I tell you what, Amir, everybody in the chat thinks that you're just a troll. You've been nothing but rude and insulting this entire time. You called us schizophrenic, which is shitty and ableist, and I'm not going to tolerate that either. Like, it's just shitty to do for a lot of reasons. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell us just in simple terms what your actual argument is. And if you can't do that, we're just going to move on. I don't want to hear your premises because you're getting into weird little pedantic arguments about you didn't use the right verbiage, this and that and the other. Just tell us in simple terms, what is the argument for God? You have like 30 seconds. Go.
Yeah, did you hear the term changeable, right? So it's not things exist.
Yes, we've heard it every time.
There are
Go on.
changeable things that exist. Oh, okay, but you just didn't write it down. I got it, right? So that's premise one. Now, premise two is saying that fact is going to be possibly be explained, right? And then three is going to be a statement that's sort of expressible in first order logic, which is saying that for all actual x, if x is possibly be explained, then x is actually be explained. And four is going to be that if C is possibly be explained, right, then C is actually be explained. And then from there, it follows that C is de-explained. And then it follows that for all y, if y is de-explained, then there exists some x which de-explains y, right? And then from there, it just follows that if C is de-explained, there exists some x which de-explains C. And then it's going to follow that there exists, and by the way, that's just universal instantiation, right? And then it follows that there exists some x which de-explains C. And then if anything de-explains C, that thing itself is not changeable. And then it just follows that there exists something that's going to de-explain C and is not changeable. That's the whole argument. And if you didn't track that, I can read it out again, right?
I don't need to because I disagree with like, by the third premise, I already disagree with you. It didn't make any sense what you said. Because first of all, just because something could possibly be explained, therefore it is and will be, or whatever the hell you said, I don't care about the exact language. What you said was just if something can be explained, then it will be or is. I disagree with that immediately. Everything that follows it is wrong then. So like immediately that's a problem. And also, at no point did you mention anything even close to a god. So try it again. Don't read all that because nobody wants to hear it. Skip to the very end and tell me, God, this is the sentence I want you to construct. I know God is real because blank. Just tell me what is your actual argument for God.
Yeah, in that sort of ramble there, I actually couldn't tell what premise you were rejecting, right? Because 3 doesn't say what you expressed it as. Now, if the confusion is how the argument gets to theism, right, you might sort of notice that the Kalam arguments, and this is sort of a basic thing that most people are going to know, the Kalam argument is sort of a stage 1 argument. There's further stage 2 arguments to derive the omni properties.
I'm going to cut you off again, Amir.
Yeah, the Kalam doesn't get you to a God.
Yeah,
the Kalam doesn't get you to a God. Yeah, the Kalam doesn't get you to, just real quick. Kalam doesn't get you to a God. Second, cause and effect is not really a thing that exists. We know that from some Nobel Prize winners who did a physics experiment that definitively disproves cause and effect. The experiment is a version of the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen, known as the Bell theorem. The basic experiment is person A observes the spin of a particle that is quantumly entangled with another particle that person B can observe. The spin person A observed means that person B will observe their particle with the opposite spin 100% of the time. Cause and effect is not a thing that exists. So if your argument is based on cause and effect, I'm sorry, physics is telling you that that is not a thing that exists. And so go argue with the physicists if that is your argument of cause and effect.
Yeah, I'm going to give you one more shot. I'm really, really bored by everything you're saying. It's been 10 minutes and you haven't said anything interesting yet. So one more time, here's your prompt. I believe in God because. That's what you're going to say next, and you're going to give us a concise answer as to why you believe in God, and then we'll answer that. If that's not what you're going to bring to the table, we're going to move on to somebody who's serious.
Wait, you made the claim that the Bell theorem disproves causation, right? Even though no premise in my argument says anything about causation, by the way, but it's hilarious that you think that. How does the Bell theorem disprove causation?
Jim, do you care to answer?
Like, why would anyone?
I did. He didn't listen. Yeah, he didn't listen. So
he didn't write that note down. He forgot to take notes.
If he doesn't understand, and he's using the Bell theorem, can you tell me what the Bell theorem is, and can you explain it?
Run away, fat ass. Yeah, run.
Mm-hmm. That's about right. Just absolutely nothing for 10 minutes of absolutely nothing, and then every single time there's a problem or a question or hey, you didn't say anything right, throw an insult and run away. Boring, dude. Boring and lazy.
Incredibly boring. Yeah. And he didn't give us enough of the cosmological argument to even Google and find out what he was talking about, which I thought was kind of interesting as well. So not really sure which cosmological. He kept talking about the literature, but again, if you don't give us enough to even Google so we can catch up, some of what he was saying, I think we needed to actually read it, trying to explain it, and voice wasn't going to work. But honestly, it wasn't anything that I've heard before, so I'm not sure what literature he's talking about.
I don't think he's read any literature, I'll be honest with you. I don't think that's the thing that happened. Because like the whole thing, it sounded like just throwing as many weird premises as possible at once and then arguing more about, I think the chat was right. I think this guy was a troll, but like it seemed like the strategy here was to say as many weird premises as possible and then spend as much time as possible arguing about the specific language of what he's saying rather than ever actually getting to say anything. So just lazy. Really lazy. Like, man, maybe I'm nostalgic. I'm 31 years old. Back in my day, trolls were like creative. You know what I mean? Like, there was something there.
Back in my day.
Yeah. You had something to go off of. Like, dude, there was so many opportunities. The dude he could have called in and gotten me on a rant. First of all, easily could have said some weird shit about biology or whatever and gotten me to talk for a long time and then pulled that and said, hey, you didn't mention this one word. And that would have wasted a lot of my time and energy and would have frustrated me a lot. That would have been that would have been a good way to he very easily could have talked to you about, because you like to go on about physics, and he could have done the same thing to you. Or if he'd actually, if you had challenged him on Bell's theorem, if he had actually looked it up and given a bad response to it, then you probably would have had to sit there and lecture on it. And then he could have gone back to the first thing. That would have been a better troll. It would have kept us on the line for like 5 more minutes and we would have been more aggravated. And just, dude.
Yeah.
It sucks to see somebody not apply themselves. So
yeah, and like I told him, for everyone who's calling, you are calling us. If you can't make us understand, that's not on us. We both have 2 very different backgrounds. We can understand a lot of things between the 2 of us. We can ask intelligent questions and get to where we're going. And if you can't make yourself understood, that's not our problem. It's yours. You're calling us. So
Just at least be a fun troll. At least actually like get under my skin. Like give me something to think about tonight.
Yeah.
We've got a few more. Do you have the call screen together?
I do.
Do you have one that looks good to you? Because we've got a million atheists on the line. We've got time for like one. So
Yeah. Do you want to go on a rant, or do you want to go on a rant?
exactly. I'll let you pick.
Let's do the fun rant. We'll go with Gabe in Texas. Oh, wait,
I like that one. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the
I was
one
hoping you picked that one.
Did I pick that one? What just happened? Hold on.
It's not there for me.
Gabe.
I'll click it.
There we go.
I'll bring him up. Yeah. Gabe, you're
There
on
we
XP.
Sorry about that.
Hi, James.
Hi.
How y'all doing?
Doing good.
Last call was terrible.
Tell us about it.
How do you respond to a family member that says Christianity is not a religion, but a relationship with Jesus Christ? It's a potential.
How do you have a relationship
mother-in-law.
with someone who refuses? Yeah, I ask them, how do you have a relationship with somebody that never shows up? You can't prove is real.
Okay.
I mean, it's literally that simple, right? It gets you right to the point, which is they need to now prove to their claim that they have a relationship with this Jesus Christ person. And then you get to engage in, how do you have a relationship, right? If, Forrest and I have a relationship, we're mostly, on AXP. We've emailed once or twice here or there, I think. We'll both be at the back cruise. But
Jim's a phenomenal dancer, and everybody there should ask him to dance.
He doesn't actually know that I'm a phenomenal dancer. But, that's one type of relationship. And then I have a relationship with my girlfriend. And Forrest, is it your girlfriend or your wife? I don't know.
My wife.
Your relationship status. Yeah, your wife.
It is my wife. She would be very upset if she was my girlfriend.
Okay. Yeah. Those are two very different relationships, girlfriend versus wife, that we have, and we have other personal relationships. So, going into and trying to define how this relationship works with the being that doesn't actually talk to you, or just responds with the same, at random, how does that work? And so you just go into that. And yeah, it is kind of funny to go there, but that's exactly the way I respond to it. I don't know, Forrest?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was messaging in the chat about the person who's upset that we talk about pronouns. I hope that person calls in, but I bet they won't. So for me, it's going to be similar. Is that like, what is a relationship actually? What are you actually talking about? But more importantly to me is like, ask them, okay, so describe that relationship. Describe what that is like. And I guarantee what they will describe is a religion. And so like, that's the whole thing is like, if I have a relationship with my wife that I can talk to her every day, that I interact with her every day, that we have boundaries and terms and conditions that border what our relationship is. We have things that we do together and things that we believe together and values and ideals and all these things. Like that's all stuff that like I can quantify. And I can discuss, and I guess not quantify, but I can qualify it, and I can discuss it, and I can like actually like make a reasonable argument for what it is and explain it. Talk about a relationship with Jesus. What do you do? I pray, and I feel like he communicates with me. Okay, cool. What are the boundary lines of that? Like, how does that actually work? Is it within? It's gonna fall down to you're behaving as in a religion. You're behaving as a religious person would in a religion. You're doing religious things. And it's because of what Jim said is this person isn't there, isn't responding. Nobody else can see them. It's like that kid in middle school who totally has a girlfriend. She just lives in Canada. It's that same thing. And like, why are you actually entertaining it? Why are you diminishing the fact that you have a religious belief? Why do you feel the need to escape religion? Why do you feel the need to separate your God from your religion? Is it not good enough? Is there some historical context there that you'd like to break down and unbox? Could maybe this distinction between relationship and religion be the first step of your deconstruction and you just don't know it yet? Because it has been for a lot of people. Like, I feel like things like that really just, they create more problems than they solve. And the people who use that kind of language are trying desperately to separate themselves from the damnable misery that is their actual religious belief, while still keeping it. It's like having your cake and praying to it too. I'm not a fan. Anyway, those are all things that I would ask. I just have a million questions, and none of them are particularly productive, because that's a really unproductive, weird thing to say.
Okay. I mean, it's because I have a potential family member, that is, I guess she's a potential mother-in-law, and they're being like giving me like a little bit of cheap shots, like, God's real, because they know I'm atheist, but they're very religious. So I know you have a very similar situation with your wife. I believe I've heard you say something like that you have family members that are religious. So I guess my second question would be, how do you have better conversations with them?
It depends on who it is. For me personally, so my wife is Mexican and has a very big Mexican family, and she like, depending on the family member I'm talking to, some of them know I'm an atheist, know what I do for a living, know what I talk about, and we can have a long, difficult discussion, and that's all great. And they'll say, well, you should really listen to this guy named Kent Hovind. And I'll be like, no, you gotta go down that way.
I have listened to that guy called Kent Hovind.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have, and it's a bad time. That is actually a thing. One of my in-laws told me to go check out Kent Hovind. It's oh boy, if only you knew. But there are other ones that I just don't. And this is one of the things, we get a lot of callers that are atheists that want to talk about, like, I don't know how to come out as an atheist to my mom, to my grandma, to my whoever. What am I going to do? One of my wife's grandparents is this just sweet old lady who would never hurt a fly, who just cares about everybody very deeply and is very devoutly Christian. And she doesn't know that I'm an atheist. She assumes that I go to church every day. For all she knows, I live and breathe that Bible. And she's got, more crosses in her house than I have hairs on my head. And she doesn't know because, like, number one, she's never really brought it up. She's never really pressed me on it. And number two, if I were to talk to her about it, best case scenario, I've made an old woman sad. That's the absolute best thing that would happen. Is that she is now going to be worried for my soul. She's going to be very upset. She's going to be worried for Amber. She's going to be, that's all that's going to happen. There's no way we're going to actually sit down and have a serious conversation. She's very old and she's set in her ways and she's not interested. And she lives in a town that's as big as my living room. You know what I mean? So like, she doesn't care. So that's the whole thing is like, it really depends on who I'm talking to and why I'm talking to them about that and what my goals are in talking to them about that. If I'm talking to one of my in-laws I have in-laws that are anti-vaxxers. And like, if I'm talking to one of them and there's going to be a very different conversation than if I'm talking to one of them that's already pretty well deconstructed, but won't admit it and uses the word Christian because it's just easier in their town. You know what I mean? Very different conversation, very different intentions behind all that.
Yeah. And so a lot depends too on how you want that relationship with the family member to go.
Yes.
I have a family member who will throw that out as a friendly jibe. And that's okay with that because we have that kind of relationship. But if this is someone being somewhat antagonistic, just throw back, prove it. If you don't mind starting a fight or whatever.
Because you will.
Yeah, you might. But again, it depends on where you want that relationship to end up as to how you actually handle it. And it does suck because it puts us on the end of being more grown up than our interlocutor in many cases.
Would encourage them to call the show be a good idea for maybe the first conversation?
As long as they know what they're getting into. Yeah. As long as they know what they're getting into. Because that's the thing is that like they just make sure to let them know that shows like this, not just this show, but like shows like this tend to be pretty antagonistic, and that we're on a time budget and we're here to get some to help people watch, but also views are important, and that if they call in and say something, they better be respectful, because they're probably going to get in an argument, and very likely, if they're a religious person, it's very likely, because of the society that we live in, that they have never heard the kind of arguments that we're going to present to them, and they've never been challenged in the way that we've challenged them. And because especially Christians in this country, they tend to, and not all Christians, but especially like in the kind that we have here, and in the way that the culture is, it's offensive to not pay deference. You know what I mean? Not being polite enough is considered offensive. I recently made a post on Instagram and everything like that, on Easter, mentioning all the other holidays that it was besides Easter. And I had a lady get mad that I didn't mention Easter, and she called it disrespectful because I didn't say it was Easter. It was disrespectful for me not to participate in the religion. That's not what disrespect means. And I know that's anecdotal, but like that's the common like vibe. So just as long as they know what they're getting into, and you don't just send some sweet old lady here to get screamed at and embarrassed, that would be a shitty thing to do. But if they know what they're getting into, and they want to participate, and they want to actually defend what they have to say and hear some real arguments, dope.
Yeah, and we're also willing to treat a grandma
argument, or like the third one after like the second or the third one, because this is the first time I'm ever confronting them with that.
Yeah, if you up to you when you want to tell them to call the show, I suppose.
Yeah, whatever you think is best, man. Anyway, we've got one more
them
theist
better than we
caller
do.
on the line. Yeah, we've got one more theist caller on the line. I'm going to try to give him the last 10 minutes, but does that answer your questions for you, Gabe?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Jen.
All right, have a good one, man. Bye-bye. Okay. Last call, super fast. Families are fun. Last call, super fast. We've got Billy, pronouns he, him, calling in from Texas. Jim said that we only have this universe to compare ourselves to, but that's not right. I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction here and guess that Billy is talking about multiverse theory. And I want to know, what does that have to do with God then? Are you just critiquing what Jim was saying and saying, well, actually, because, okay, whatever. But like, is there a God point that you're getting to?
Your prediction is wrong. I'm not talking about multiverse theory.
Hell yeah.
I'm talking about the argument that we only have one universe to compare things to. We don't just have one universe to compare things to. We have
What's the other universe?
Create simulated universes. We create simulated universes, and that's what we use to compare
How do we know those simulated universes are the only universes that are possible? And how do we know and are all simulations accurate?
Well, we plug in the known variables, and then we have to guess. We have to guess the variables that we don't know, and then we run the simulation and we see if it matches.
So is
with
guessing
what we see in reality.
guessing a good way to determine the truth? Is guessing a good way to determine the truth?
Well, you run the simulation and see if it matches with reality. If it doesn't, then you know your variables are wrong. You have to redo.
So the reality that you're trying to match it to is this
again.
universe. The reality you're trying to match it to is this universe.
Exactly.
Yes, you do that. You compare it to this universe over and over and over again. And we don't know how accurate and here's the other problem with, there's also another problem with your running your simulation theory. And that is the way computers do math. If they're doing floating point, IEEE floating point, the math is going to be wrong just because of the way IEEE floating point works. But we also can't do infinite precision numbers very well. And so we're going to start losing precision pretty quickly, even if we're not using the IEEE. So if we're using big decimal or something along those lines, we're going to have issues with fidelity. And small things can add up very, very quickly. Small errors can add up. So there is no way we can take a simulation and call that a real universe. It's a simulated universe, but there's really nothing we can do off of that because we do have this problem with fidelity and doing the numbers correctly. So it's not another universe. It has to be a real universe to compare it to.
Check it out. I found this wig while I was off camera. Yeah, that's the big thing for me is that, like, you're saying, yeah, we have these simulations, but like simulations are just models. And we have a saying in science that all models are wrong. Some of them are useful. And what we mean is that we always have to compare things to this universe that we're in. So at the end of the day, what Jim said, you may be pedantic about it, but at the end of the day, what he said is right. I don't know what the problem is. And also, how does this get us to a God?
Well, are you saying that Illustrious TNG 300 is not a accurate simulation?
I'm saying that it's a
It's
simulation.
not as accurate as reality. It's not as accurate as reality, and it can't be because we can't do infinite precision, right? How far can we calculate pi and still use it?
Because reality is what reality looks like, and the simulation is, at the end of the day, still just a simulation.
Right.
But it matches with what we see in reality. When they run the simulation, it matches with reality. So then what they can do...
To what degree of fidelity?
They can modify... To
what degree of fidelity?
They can modify...
To what degree of fidelity? How many decimal points of accuracy? And you realize that no matter what number you come up with, it's not enough, right?
It's exactly...
I know that TNG 300... I know that TNG 300 is pretty good, and now that they have the Frontier supercomputer, they're going to be starting to work on.
How many decimal points of pi do they use? How many decimal points of pi is there in reality?
I think 120. Once you get over 120 decimal points of pi, it doesn't really matter.
It matters.
It doesn't. It matters. All those errors add up. All those errors add up over time, especially when you're talking about millions of years and you're doing long-term simulations and you increase the number of objects, right? Yep. All those small little tiny errors start to add up. That's why I say we do not have the fidelity to do infinite precision. The only way to do infinite precision is to have an actual universe. And comparing anything to a simulation and saying that's as good as the real thing is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Why do they do? Then why do they make those? Why are they making simulations?
To learn something if they can. To play with the numbers and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, you can learn things at a small scale. We don't have a simulation that tells us everything we could possibly know about the universe. That's not we don't have that technology. So like that's the thing, man. We can learn things on the small. I love that this is the full screen right now. We can learn things on the small scale. With the simulation, that's what the simulations are for. But as I said at the beginning, all simulations, all models are wrong. Some of them are useful. It's like a map. Every map is wrong. The Earth is what the Earth looks like. You can have a really good like Google satellite map, or you can have like a crappy handwritten map from like the 1300s. They're both wrong. One's better than the other, but neither one of them is what the Earth actually looks like at that exact moment. It just because you're taking a three-dimensional shape and rendering it, and it's not going to happen. And so like that's the whole thing, dude. Is like a simulation is still a simulation, but you haven't answered the question that I asked. How does any of this get you to a God?
Well, the precise values of fundamental force characteristics and cosmological constants that are found in the fine scale structure of reality demonstrate precision that's beyond the acknowledged figure for statistical impossibility to happen by chance.
Okay, so the whole thing is the argument for complexity. That's what you called in about. Is that the universe is too complex for it to happen by chance, which is what we've already addressed, right?
No.
Okay, so how is it different?
Well, it sounded like it.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. So how is it different? How is that different?
Extreme precision would be the argument.
Put this on my head?
Extreme precision.
Why do you think? So I use the word extreme precision because we're talking about floating point numbers like pi. When you say extreme precision, what do you mean by extreme precision? Because pi has no end. So how do you take a value like pi and say extreme precision?
Who cares about pi? Who cares about pi?
I'm just using that as an example of a number that does not have.
The universe cares about pi.
Let's talk about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the cosmological.
How do you describe a sphere with? How do you describe a sphere or a circle without pi?
You don't. I mean, why are you? This is that's not relative to my argument at all. It doesn't matter.
You're talking about precision. No, you just talked about precision. And my question is, how much precision can you have with a value like pi?
That makes no sense. That question does not make sense.
Why?
Yeah, so your statement about the universe being too precise makes no sense either. The same way. That's the answer.
I never said it was too. I never said it was too precise. I never said it was too precise. You've strawman me again.
You said that the precision of the universe, how extremely precise the universe is your argument for a God. Is that right?
The values of cosmological constants and fundamental force characteristics in the universe.
And pi is one of those constants.
They exhibit a precision that is beyond the acknowledged figure for statistical impossibility at 1 in 10 to the 50th. And if you look at
is that a valid for statistical? So you realize that you realize that the value you just gave. In what context are we using that? Because it doesn't matter. How do you know that something is impossible just by a statistical value? I mean, unlikely, sure. But you can't say impossible. You could say unlikely, but you can't say impossible. That's just not the way statistics works.
We make simulations, and that's what demonstrates that whether things are possible or not. Like if you change
how big my forehead is
no,
right now.
only you keep coming back to simulations. You're not going to convince us with simulations because we understand how simulations work better than you do.
Well, you do. I don't. I don't do simulations. So I'm not a computer guy.
Oh. Yeah, so you have a problem with every simulation. You have a problem with every simulation in that it has to make assumptions because it can't do everything. You can't track. If you're going to do a simulation, you can do a simulation of the solar system probably fairly well. I don't know how, you have enough memory, I suppose, to track every single asteroid.
Have you ever
probably.
Have you ever played with Universe Sandbox 2? Have you ever played with Universe Sandbox 2?
Yes, I've played with simulators before, and you can do all kinds of really fun things with them. But the problem that you keep coming up with, that you're going to run up against, is not a single simulation does everything. Not a single simulation of the entire universe, because we don't know what the entire universe looks like. So that's not possible. And second, we can't do infinite precision.
Dude, I never said.
If you can't describe a circle without pi, and you don't have a precision with pi, how do you describe anything? And this is true of the other constants as well, right? To what precision are we talking about? And keep in mind that it has to be within some sort of reason for the entire universe, because as small numbers, small errors add up. You're just not correct on this. And in any simulation you can get to.
Not correct, dude. You're not correct.
I am correct, because between the two of us, who's written a simulation?
Okay.
Between the two of us, who's written a simulation?
Who's written a simulation?
Yes. Yeah,
I
coded.
don't write simulation. I study simulation.
Good. I have written them. I have written them. And guess what? You have a precision problem.
I don't believe you. Yeah.
You don't believe me? Okay, so here's the only thing you need to do is do this. Go look up how to do floating point number math on computers with precision. Go look that up and how to do that.
And that will not matter to my argument at all. That will not.
Oh, well,
he already knows. He doesn't know what it is, but he already knows that it won't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. You got a lot of learning to do, Billy. I'm sorry. You need to figure out why precision matters. You need to understand what representation of floating point numbers you're using, because if you're using IEEE, you're going to have errors, because IEEE cannot do all infinite, or doesn't represent all floating point numbers correctly. That's the reason why, as someone who has also worked for a number of banks, we don't use float or double for doing any type of calculations for money, because you always end up with an invalid value. So we have to use big decimal, and even with big decimal, which gives us closer to infinite or a large precision, it doesn't get us to infinite precision. And that's just doing error calculations with interest rates over 20 years. So, doing the types of math that you're going to be doing. Sure.
Do I get to talk at all? Ever? Dude,
no, check it out. I found a different wig.
Everything you just said is completely irrelevant. Everything you just said is completely irrelevant. It's
No, everything I just said goes into building
Everything
simulations. Everything I just said is
it has
talking about
nothing to
how
do-
you build
it has-
simulations.
Who gives
So
a
this is
crap?
how you build a
Who
simulation.
cares?
This is how you build a
Dude,
Tell us,
Oh,
Jim. Tell us
I
how to build
don't
simulations.
care.
yeah, never mind. Yeah, so he just admitted that he has nothing to talk about because he just said, "Who cares about how you build a simulation?"
When
When he's
that's like
talking
the point
about
of the call.
simulations, the whole point of the call, right? So if you're going to build a simulation of something like the solar system, then you need to represent the sun. You need to represent the sun's mass. You need to represent the sun's size, and then there's a whole bunch of other ephemera that you need to be able to represent as well. Gravitic, all that kind of good stuff. How accurate do you want to get on your simulation of the sun? If you're just doing a gravitic model, you don't need to know how hot the sun is. You just need to know the gravity, and you need the functions for gravity. But if you are going to try and do energy and all of that, now you need to know how all that works. You need to do the simulation of how the sun actually works because the sun has ebb and flow in it as well, all that kind of good stuff. All those things get represented by, guess what? Floating point numbers. And,
What I love, I love the fact that he called in to say I know you're wrong because simulations exist. And you're like, that's not how simulations work. And then he spent the next 10 minutes like, I don't care how simulations work. And I don't care what simulations are. And I'm not talking about simulations. Okay. And it's like, what's your argument for God? The universe is too precise. Okay. So you're saying the universe is too precise to be by chance? No, I'm saying simulations are thing. And you know what, though? He is the one thing that I will say is I've played a really good simulation called No Man's Sky, and I didn't see any gods in there. And that's my proof that there is no God. And yes, that is a straw man. And that's the best that argument deserves. With that,
I have to agree. That was a horrible idea of
that was a
calling
wild
into
time.
someone who, yeah. I did a simulation of dragons.
Eyebrows. You did a dragon simulation?
Yeah, we did a dragon simulation. Yeah, our dragons when they were doing nothing were toasting bluebirds.
Nice.
So
I bought all these.
I had to do something.
I bought all these wigs because I'm doing a demo this summer about static electricity. I'm going to get a big old Van de Graaff generator and make these crazy wigs stand on end. But like
awesome
unintentional benefit of that, like I didn't expect this, but like side benefit, look at me, the drama. My God,
you're ravishing.
This could be a style, you know. I mean, look at this, girl. Tell me you're not impressed. Welcome to AXP. Call in next week for more great hosts. But how great could it be if it's not this?
If it doesn't have that hair, it cannot be great. You're entirely correct, Forrest.
I look like what J. Mike wishes he was. Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine J. Mike in flaming pink?
Oh, he'd be fucking unstoppable. Like,
Tell him.
We've got really quick before we go. I am going to take this off because it's awful. We've got really quick before we wrap up. We're a little bit over time. Do you want to do the voicemail thing? Because I think those are fun.
Yeah, we can do that.
Sick. All right. So every week we've been the crew has been keeping voicemails for us, and they put here in the thing, the note. The thing that I've got that there is one this week, but we haven't heard it. We have no idea what it is. So I'm going to ask the crew, can we please listen to the voicemail from this week and
My
see?
My question is about the variety of people and how when we're animals, why are we so different from the other animals and how did we get to make so many different things? We know we're close to extinction if we don't change anything around. But I was just wondering if anybody else thought about that. But thank you.
That's an awesome question. That's really great. Yeah. So I would just say, one of the things she said was, why are we so different from the other animals? We're not. Like we are great apes. We are primates. We are mammals. We are. You can look at like all sorts of similarities between humans and all sorts of other taxa. But that's the cool thing is that like when you look at pick any animal, any nudibranch sea slug, or any fish, or any dog, or whatever like that. You can say, why is this so different from every other kind of thing? And you can find marked differences between dogs and whales and ask the exact same question. The fact of the matter is, we're just another animal, and we have some unique things, some what we call derived traits that make us unique because they're the product of our evolutionary environment over 200,000 years ago. But if you look, I think it's more interesting if you look at the similarities that we have. You Google the word homology and see the similar bone structures, the similar genes, similar eyes, similar teeth, similar all sorts of things that unite us with all the other animals. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And I think too, you can look at behavior, and you can look at, we have two animals. One, they do the exact same thing. They both detect a threat to their tribe, their group. They both scream and yell and shout to warn everybody. They both attract the attention of the predator at risk to their own lives. Which one of these two is acting morally? Well, they're doing the exact same thing, but one's a meerkat, one's a human being. And I ask the question again, which one's acting morally? And most people will say the human being. And I'll say, well, why? It's the same action, right? They're doing the exact same thing. And we can see these types of moral behavior in nearly every social species that I'm aware of. And I say nearly just to be pedantic.
Just to be safe. Yeah, put that couch in there. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I am actually willing to say that every social animal exhibits some sort of behavior that we would label, if a human did it, moral. Because cooperation is a survival strategy.
Yeah.
And so there are rules to cooperation. There are rules to cooperation that even bacteria understand, right? Bacteria can detect other bacteria cheating in the agreement and then take steps to prevent the cheating. And they even have correction measures in some cases. So if we can see this type of behavior in bacteria, we're not all that different. And we see it even more complex behavior, as we would expect, and more complex animals that are also social. So.
Yeah. I think that's great. Yeah. And that's very true. Because like you have, I don't want to, I think what you said is actually freaking perfect. I was just kind of stalling for time because I was seeing what the donation goal is for our fundraiser. Katie, if you can hear this, just type it into the document you have here so I can know what is our, because I mentioned earlier is that we've got a fundraiser going on right now, and you can donate using the donation link, which should be right below the chat at this moment. But they are trying to raise a good deal of money in order to not only fund the ACA, but also to fly hosts like me out for the Bat Cruise, which is coming up in August. And so right now they're trying to raise some money, and you can donate. You put, throw $1, throw $5, throw $10 down there, try to get something going on. And I see it right now. The goal is, okay, great. Yeah. If we raise more than $5,000, this fundraiser, I'll do a whole show wearing one of these. That's a thing I can promise. There you go. I know
how
everybody.
short we are.
So it gets real serious real fast, right? So yeah, if you guys want to go down there to do the thing, donate what you can to help support the ACA and help us fly people out for the Bat Cruise, help us run these programs. If we raise $5,000, you get an hour and a half of me in one of these. Maybe not this exact one, but it'll be at least as fabulous. And we'll see how seriously we can take those calls. With that,
should we let the top donor choose the wig? Let the top donor choose the wig?
Maybe. I only have a couple of wigs, but like some of them are.
Well, yeah, choose one from your collection. Yeah, choose one from your collection.
I'll have to buy some more wigs so they have a good choice. But yeah, dude. Well, we'll see. We'll see. We're willing to try it. I just Katie just texted in here. I don't know how to identify the top donor, but I'm willing to try. So like it sounds like that's a thing. Anyway, if everybody who's watching right now, how many people do we have watching? We've got 1.2 thousand. So let's take 5,000 divided by 1.2 thousand. Oh, fuck. I did it wrong. Sorry. 5,000 divided by 1,200 is, if everybody watching this show donated $5, we'd be there. You know what I mean? So like, just think. I probably did that math wrong. I don't know. But yeah, just something to think about. Did you hit that little donation button down there? With that, I believe that's the end of our show. Unless you have anything else, Jim.
No, that's it.
All right, sick. I'm going from this show straight to another one. I'm streaming all day today. I'm starting to do we did the, what is it called? The Sunday show after dark over on the line. I'm doing that immediately. So I'm going to go freshen up, chug a monster, and do more streaming, I guess.
All right.
I've got
Thanks,
a
Forrest.
day, man. Dude, you're awesome. I love working with you. I hope to get to do it in sometime.
Yeah.
As for everybody else tuning in, thank you so much for watching today's show. Thank you so much for calling in. If you called in, thank you so much for our moderators and the chats for keeping the chat civil. Thank you so much for our call screeners for making sure that we get only the top quality callers, except for that one guy. Thank you so much to our producers and the people who run the show, our crew. Thank you so much to the people who like edit things and like put the clips together to help generate more traction algorithmically. We appreciate all of that. And with that, I'm your host, Forrest, Lord of the Valkais. Have an awesome rest of your day and never stop learning. Bye-bye.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to stop questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your lies.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.